Hello and welcome. My name is Derek Schraner. Today we're going to be doing a reveal of, got kind of a big book here, The Summer Job, my latest book. Well, not my latest book, but the latest release called The Summer Job. And this won't be a how to play. There is no how to play. There won't be a how to play for this book because it's actually relatively straightforward and quite simple. There's no mini games, sort of, but more on that later. And if you're looking for a deeper dive, there is one available on the Lockdown Ludonot channel on YouTube that you might want to watch after this. But for now, we're going to do this reveal, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start with the front of the book. So we've got the front cover, and it's a soft cover paperback book with matte finish. In terms of its dimensions, it's 14 centimeters wide by 22 centimeters high. In terms of inches, that is 5.5 inches wide by 8.5 inches high. In terms of the number of pages, it's 322 pages in length, but the pages are not marked for reasons that will become apparent if you've, played other game books or choose your own adventures. But there are section numbers, and those section numbers come to 276. You'll notice on the front there is this gray band that says not for resale. If you purchase the book yourself, you won't have that resale band across yours. The reason I have this here is just because it's an advanced proof for the author, just to check things out. And in fact, the cover is not completely final as you see it here. There have been some small touches made. When I saw the final version here, I made a few little tweaks, like increasing the size of the title and increasing the size of the author's name here just to fill up some of the empty space. And there were some changes made to the grid to make it look a little rougher. Now, in terms of the side here, the spine reads the title here, The Summer Job, Derek Schraner. And then on the back, we have the blurb, the usual Lockdown Ludonot logo in the top left corner, and the slug up here, Summer in Kyoto. The city is alive with danger. A foreign syndicate has sent its sights on a heist in the heart of Japan, and you are the fledgling thief at the center of it all. It isn't just their mission, it's your adventure. As the Gion Matsuri festival pulses through the streets, you'll face unexpected twists that could change everything in the future. Every decision made affects the world, your path, and the end. Dozens of different stories are waiting for you. Set against the vibrant backdrop of Kyoto's most famous festival, The Summer Job is the first break system gamebook. Accessible, fun, and full of surprises, the unexpected is waiting. Ready to roll? The heat and the heist is on. Now, looking back at the front cover, I already mentioned a couple of changes that had been made, but overall, I'm quite happy with the way this turned out. Seeing as this is a crime story about a heist, I really wanted to evoke the era of Saul Bass, particularly in terms of design and in terms of heist films and credit sequences and things like that. So what I created here was sort of, a meeting point or an intersection between my aesthetics and Saul Bass aesthetics. And as you may know, if you look at any of my other game books, I have quite a tendency to come back to grids, especially 3x3 grids and dice and things like that for mechanisms. But you'll also see that there are some symbols here that are quite evocative of Saul Bass. And I created these myself using construction paper, and I'm really pleased with the results. And I plan to carry that aesthetic through to the follow-up installments as well. Now let's take a look inside. We've got the frontispiece and all the front matter there, like the credits and the dedications, and then we've got the contents. So compared to most of the game books that I've produced, these contents are fairly straightforward. There's the introduction, there's the Summer Job itself, which is the Choose Your Own Adventure section of the book, which is just the story. There's no minigame to speak of. We'll come back to that. And there are some appendices, which we'll look at in more detail later. and an About the Author section. There's the introduction. This book tells an interactive crime story. Your choices shape how the mission evolves. Start reading on the next page, section 0, and at the end of each section, you may either be sent to a new section or offered a choice from multiple sections. Follow the instructions to move the plot along until you have reached any of the various possible endings. This book is the first in a trilogy, and one path is part of an ongoing narrative, but feel free to explore side branches as well. Every development is valid, not every ending is bad, and even true paths may lead to unexpected outcomes. If you reach an ending, but want to see where a different choice may have gone, you can always return to your last decision or simply start afresh. Remember, there are no wrong choices, just different stories. The journey is yours to experience, and the adventure is up to you. Happy heisting! So from that, maybe I'll come back to the idea that there are no page numbers here. And I've mentioned this in other videos, where having page numbers and a game book that depends on section numbers becomes a little confusing sometimes. If you have extra page numbers and then you have an instruction telling you go to section 145, for example, or 50 or whatever the number is, it's never entirely clear whether it means go to page 145 or go to section 145. And in this case, only sections have numbers. So whatever number is shown in the instruction, you would go to that section number. So as for the Gamebook section itself, it starts at section 0 and it goes as far as 276 over here. And you'll notice there are not really any short sections. They tend to be fairly substantial, at least by Gamebook standards. If you've read a lot of Gamebooks, you'll know that sometimes there are section numbers where it just says, "You are dead," the end, or whatever, It sends you somewhere very brief. They tend to be quite substantial, at least 100 to 200 words. And they have typical sort of mechanisms that you'll be familiar with if you've read any other game books. When you finish reading a section, it may either say go to a particular number and you go to that section to continue reading, or it will offer you a choice saying what now, and then give you a few sort of bullets saying, if you choose to do this particular thing, go to that corresponding page. If you do this other thing, go to a different page, and then you continue reading from those points on. But you will find, I think, that this is different from most game books in another way, not just the length of the sections, but in the structure of the story itself, in that I tried to have a bit of an open world quality to the world, so that you can move around within it a little bit more freely than you might normally. Normally it's quite linear and one way in most books where you go through and you can't go back and forth. But in this, I tried to sort of create something where you can go back and forth. And that's because it is a heist story. There's essentially two streams. And one stream is like the reconnaissance stream, and one is, okay, you've committed to doing the job stream. And when you're doing the reconnaissance stream, for the most part, you can walk around the world freely, scope things out, look for clues, all that kind of thing. And at any point when you're ready, you can take a choice that says, I'm ready to begin the job at whatever point. And when you're ready to begin the job, then you're kind of on this roller coaster ride. And the more you've surveilled and looked through the open world and looked around and found clues, hopefully the smoother the job goes, right? I don't want to give too much away, so I'm not going to go into too much detail or have spoilers or anything like that. But hopefully you'll find that it's a fairly flexible system, and there are dozens of different endings. So even if you get to an ending and you'd like to try again, you may have a completely different experience. Okay, so next let's look at the appendices, and there's 4 of those. Now, there's nothing in the appendices that require play sheets or glossaries, an index, anything more complex. A lot of my game books have mini games and systems that require some frequently asked questions to be accounted for by the materials. So I include play sheets and reference materials and things like that. But this is probably the most straightforward of all the books in terms of being almost pure narrative. There are choices to be made, but there's very little in terms of game. And again, I'll come back very shortly to one exception to this. But let's look through the appendices for now. First thing that we have is a vocabulary scavenger hunt. And this is a little mini game that you can play, but it's not necessary to the story itself or to completing the heist. It's more just for fun. And it says, this story uses many different Japanese terms. Here are 9. How many can you find? So it lists some of the words that are used in the environment. And if you find them, you can check them off and see if you can complete the entire grid, find them all. You may have to go through all kinds of different storylines to find them. They're not all available on the same single branch of the story. That's one activity. The next one is called Happy End of the World Bingo. Happy End of the World is inspired by a song title by one of my favorite Japanese bands of all time, Pizzicato 5. It says here, there are 45 endings. Here are just 9 of them. How many have ended you? And similar to the vocabulary grid, this is a grid where you can check off all the different ways that you might end the story and see if you've encountered these all. So it hopefully takes makes a bit of a fun activity out of the fact that your story has ended. So there's various different ways that your story can end, and see if you can find as many as possible here. There's obviously 45, there's many more than these 9, but these are 9 in the bingo that are, again, on different branches. So you'll have to have very disparate experiences to find all of these, I think. And next, here's the mini game that I've been alluding to from time to time here. And I don't want to say too much about this. This is called Retlaw's Race Car Minigame. There are 11 parts of the race car minigame rules. Can you find them all? And then it includes a quote that you'll find one of the characters says in the story. There's a game I'm pretty fond of called Race Car. I'll have to tell you about it sometime. It's relatively simple. And then you'll see 11 blank numbered bullets. And the purpose of this is to find all 11 parts of Retlaw's Race Car minigame. So buried in the story at various points are single lines of instructions that are numbered 1 through 11. And if you can find them all, and you can assemble them in order 1 through 11, it gives you the instructions for a further game that you can play based on the break system, which I'll come back to shortly. But it's kind of, again, another thing to look for, almost like a little scavenger hunt or a treasure hunt, that you can add some additional interest to the story by finding these little pieces. And then even when you're done, you now have another little game that you could play if you'd like to. Next, we have selected music for a summer job. This is something I love doing with most of the stories that I write. And this is a list of songs that I listened to quite a bit when I was writing the story. And I got them all out again because I had heard some of them for decades. I've heard some of them since, for example, the Kitaro song I've known since I was a little boy, when I was exposed to Kitaro's music by a friend and his father. And various other artists along here I discovered either when I was living in Japan or since returning from Japan or through various different means. And I got them all out and I listened to all of their stuff while I was writing to get myself kind of in that frame of mind again, in that mood. And I assembled a selection of each of their sort of Japanese adjacent works to suit the tone of the story and the pace of the story. And each one of these songs represents almost like a chapter or a sort of chunk of the plot. And so if you listen through it, you should get the mood of the entire arc of the story from beginning to end. And maybe you'd like to listen to this while you play through or listen or read through the book, all putting you in that sort of frame of mind at the same time. Or maybe it's just something fun to listen to. You may discover something that you love that you didn't know existed up to now. And I'll more than likely have a playlist available on YouTube on my channel or on the Lockdown Ludnaut channel with these selections as well. And then just an About the Author section is the last thing here. Okay, so I mentioned the game Race Car as an example of a mini game. And again, it's not something that's necessary in order to enjoy this book or even to get through it at all. You don't need the music, you don't need the bingo, you don't need the vocabulary, you don't need the mini game. All of these things are just additional bonuses, think of them that way. But the interesting thing, to me at least, about the Race Car minigame is that it's a little vestigial element that ties in the summer job here into sort of a wider world of what I called the break system. I mentioned earlier that the summer job was not my latest book, but that it was the latest book to be released. The summer job is actually the second book that I've written recently. The first one I wrote was last year, and it's a huge tome. It's a behemoth and kind of intimidating, and I feel like I bit off more than I could chew. It's been finished, it's been registered and submitted for copyright registration, all that kind of thing. But I haven't released it yet. It occurred to me when I looked at it, it's this big reference book basically on how to play a game called Break, which is a heist simulator. And I thought, this is maybe overambitious, and I felt almost like I needed to take a bit of a mental break from it because I'd been so immersed in it, and it's quite complex and it's quite extensive. And I thought what I'd like to do actually is to, rather than confront people with this big encyclopedia full of rules, which is very intimidating, I'd like to ease people into it. So I thought what I might do is write a little trilogy of stories. Turned out it was the longest thing I've written so far, other than the original book. But I thought what I'd like to do is write a little trilogy where the first one takes place in the summertime, the second takes place in the autumn, the third takes place in the winter, and then there's a little element that ties the big book into the spring. But the first book is quite simple. It's just a story. It just involves choices through a sort of choose your own adventure motif, if you want to call it that, or structure. The second one will be the same, but it will then add dice, and it has a gambling theme. It's set in a casino, about a heist at a casino. They're all heist crime stories. And then it will add that random element, which is very common in a lot of my game books. The third one will then keep the choices, keep the randomness with the dice, but it will then add some record keeping, sort of taking notes and keeping track of stats and things like that. And all of that is to sort of gradually ease people into the complexity of the final big fourth rule book. What was the original book will now become the fourth book in the series. So I'm kind of hoping that this is just the first step in a series that will culminate in a big fourth volume, essentially, that is the most complex thing of all. But I didn't want to scare people off, so I want to ease them in with here's a story, then we add an element, then we add another element, then you get the whole thing all at once. So hopefully that's helpful. In any case, I hope this video has been helpful to you in terms of sharing information about the summer job, as well as any other sort of parts of the series. And if you liked the video and you found it helpful, please give us a like and share it with other people. If you'd like to keep in touch and have more information about this and other game books that I produce, please subscribe to the Lockdown Ludonot channel on YouTube. And otherwise, if you're interested in getting in touch, please feel free to leave a comment or reach out to me, and I'll be happy to get back to you. For now, I'm going to put my head back down because I've got a follow-up that I've got to start writing. But until then, bye for now. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you again soon.
You